Let's talk about bánh mì.
Và hơn 10 quốc gia trên thế giới đã xuất hiện hình ảnh chiếc bánh mì cùng với cụm từ tôn vinh bánh mì Việt Nam.
A passerby whispered to me that this banh mi was the best in town.
Bánh mì kẹp thịt kiểu Việt Nam được Forbes đưa vào nhóm 20 sản phẩm tác động mạnh tới khẩu vị người dùng.
Michelin đã trở thành một trong các chuỗi cửa hàng thức ăn nhanh nổi tiếng nhất nước Mỹ.
Whenever somebody talks about Vietnamese cuisine, they would mention bánh mì as one of the most symbolic national culinary specialties. Is it surprising to you that bánh mì, just a few years ago, it was just as honored as xôi mặn or bánh bèo in the past? As it was just the Vietnamese local food for daily lives. So, how do we get here? How do we get to the point that bánh mì becomes so popular and becomes such a high standard and stands for every caliber of Vietnamese culinary symbol? Is it a result of a long development of history that dated long back as the French colonial time that bring and introduced the French baguette to the Vietnamese society? Is it also because of the Vietnamese diaspora to the world after 1975 that also bring bánh mì with them to spread the culinary? Or is it because of the gastro diplomacy used by the Vietnamese government with the media to promote bánh mì and also tourism with them? Let's find out with us. But first, a brief history about bánh mì. Bánh mì originated from the French baguette in the 19th century and people like it a lot. No. That kind of history about bánh mì is so familiar with you guys. I want to talk about the historical factor that leads to the standard of bánh mì today. Okay, again, how did we actually get to the culinary symbol of Vietnam? To answer this question, we need to travel back in time to the Vietnamese diaspora in 1975. In 1975, after the liberation of South Vietnam, many Southern Vietnamese also fled to the foreign countries, and mainly the United States, bringing the bánh mì recipe with them, and often because of some sickness, but many also chose to make a living with it in the form of food trucks and restaurants. This was when the Vietnamese language started to appear in the Western countries and gained a tremendous amount of popularity from the citizens there. It's one of the first experiences with Vietnamese food. When bánh mì was brought to the West, specifically America, as Vietnamese Americans make half of the total population of the overseas Vietnamese, its popularity was quickly amplified by both the people and the media for two reasons. First, the Western media has much more freedom of speech and freedom of expression, especially when from the 1970s onward, much of the American journalism has merged into a big conglomerate, resulting in further expansion of influence. Second, the topic of cuisine in Western countries like America has already become extremely popular in the press since then, and which would also give birth to a celebrity chef status that made in 20th century chefs like Anthony Bourdain and Thomas Keller held, even till now. Therefore, as a new cuisine being brought into America by Vietnamese immigrants, bánh mì was sure to gain attention in a short period, thus quickly spreading its name to places far and wide and creating a worldwide trend. So at this point, like walking around the United States, it is very easy to find a bánh mì store that's selling, obviously, the good old bánh mì. And the food industry with the Vietnamese origin here was like booming. And in the trend, I'd love to mention this guy, Lê Văn Chiêu. He's the one who founded Lee Sandwich, but also known as bánh mì Ba Lẹ, and it is a very well-known bánh mì brand in the United States with like more than 60 locations.
Ngon nhất vẫn là bánh mì baguette kiểu Pháp.
Everybody knows it, everybody likes it, and like whenever a new shop opened elsewhere, like people would stand in line and waiting to get a new good old bánh mì. And it was like the picture of how bánh mì was very well consumed and very well known by the foreigners back in the 2000s and even now.
The world's largest bánh mì chain.
Back in the 20th centuries, when Vietnam was still war-ridden and the media was extremely different from that in other countries, and especially in the north, since the country was still in period of wartime.
Bây giờ là 19 giờ.
And because newspaper and radios, which back then was government owned and often focused more on broadcasting the war efforts. And the newspapers such as Báo Cờ Giải Phóng or Báo Đỏ aimed to rally the people to stand up against the colonizer and act as a political weapon during wartime. And even the products that are nowadays intended for entertainment and enjoyment, such as music, film, and poetry, had to promote the message of the government and the Liberation Army during these times. And all the topic that would go against the main goal of the government and would not be published. Bánh mì was pretty normal, pretty ordinary until this guy,
You know, I fell in love with Vietnam.
Anthony Bourdain, came to Hội An and tried the best bánh mì in the world, also bánh mì Phượng. And yeah, he made a documentary for that. And after that, there was a rocket trend on the internet to find the keyword bánh mì, and like people all over the world are very shocked about bánh mì and they want to try the best bánh mì in the world. And
I really love bánh mì Saigon.
Bánh mì Saigon.
I really love bánh mì Saigon.
also the bánh mì is like, wow, bánh mì is very popular now, and I think we should take the bánh mì here and like make it explode. Well, the thunderstorm just put it out. According to statistics related to the searches on Google from 2004 to 2019, the frequency of the searches for the keyword bánh mì in Vietnam skyrocketed after this particular event, and soon the public began to accept bánh mì as one of the Vietnamese national dishes. Therefore, in a way, it could be said that bánh mì has reached its current status thanks to the influence of foreign countries. And this happens because of the Vietnamese immigrants post 1974.
Dự với nhiệm vụ chính là thực hiện đổi mới đất nước, khởi xướng đưa đất nước tiến hành công cuộc đổi mới.
So, what about đổi mới? In the post-war years, there existed a deep divide between those who had left Vietnam and those who remained political. And there had been an intense efforts between the two sides to discredit and even erase the existence of the other within their respective community. Carruthers, a British philosopher, saying the cultural artifacts such as music, literature, magazines has been temporarily banned in Vietnam in attempts to distance the Communist Party's version of national imagining from that of the fallen Southern Vietnamese. First, reason of the deep economic concerns, major economic policy changes from the Mới allowed Vietnam to integrate into the international Western-dominated diplomatic stage, lifting Vietnam from the severe suffering in the economy and thus the living standard due to the blockade. And that leads to the second change. Vietnamese in foreign countries played a major role in economic integration, whether through advisory roles, transference of knowledge, or directly funneling foreign investment back into Vietnam. And this was strongly, as a matter of fact, embraced by the Vietnamese authorities as in many policies and rhetoric prior. And after Đổi Mới saw dramatic change in regards to the foreign diaspora Vietnamese.
Anh Quang ơi, tôi giới thiệu cho anh nha, đây là con dâu Việt kiều ở bên Mỹ mới về.
If before there was a kind of removal of existence, then after the policy and reports used languages such as overseas Vietnamese, đồng bào, and their duty towards to the motherland, nghĩa vụ đối với tổ quốc. This plays a very important role in changing the narrative of national identity and within domestic state-sponsored media.
30 năm sau ngày những người tản cư Việt Nam đầu tiên đặt chân lên đất nước này, người Việt vẫn nghe văng vẳng đâu đây tiếng trống đồng, một biểu tượng cho tình đoàn kết và văn hóa lâu đời của người Việt Nam.
Well, there was a time the president of Vietnam, Nguyễn Minh Triết, went to Dana Point, Cali to meet with the Lee Sandwich boss, Lê Văn Chiêu, and they had a very good talk. And that would show how the Vietnamese community outside the country would connect to the mainland, how strict they are. However, after that, there are still kind of like protests outside the Lee Sandwich headquarters, and that seems very hilarious to me. Okay, coming back to the bánh mì itself, Carruthers proposed that this caused a shift in the understanding of the Vietnamese identity as a transnational ethnic cultural identity, and this helps see the emergence of the Vietnamese cultural artifacts and being adopted as a national pride as they are popularized in the West by the Vietnamese diaspora, and then being adopted again by the Vietnamese themselves. And in addition, Through a change in the government directive, state media were then more openly embracing foreign nationals, contributing into turn in adoption of various popular cultural artifacts besides bánh mì, such as phở.
The best pho that you ever make in your life. Don't believe me?
Thus, in the 2000s, when bánh mì became a popular cultural artifact in the Western world, through the Vietnamese overseas and then appeared again on the international articles, such as The Guardian list of top street food, and it was quickly reported by the Vietnamese media. Continuing from that, there were many interviews and coverage of the Việt Kiều people who own the bánh mì stores in the foreign countries like Lee Sandwich that I mentioned before.
The world's largest bánh mì chain.
And in those articles, they often highlight the cultural connection between the Vietnamese in Vietnam and those who had migrated to other countries, further contributing this cross-border identity. And in Vietnam itself, the emerged talks about bánh mì as a source of pride and a key cultural artifact. Furthermore, in 2008, when bánh mì was added to the Oxford Dictionary, it was widely covered by Vietnamese media. The Vietnamese Tourism Board had toured bánh mì as a national cultural feature and added many long-time bánh mì shops into its key tourist attractions and organized bánh mì festivals. Bánh mì is thus embraced and encouraged by the official media. A very good tool of cultural promotion is already popularized by the Vietnamese diaspora in the foreign countries. Without đổi mới and the shift in the cultural identity, the integration effort into the Western world, bánh mì might not have been emerged as a national culture and symbol like it is today. So surprisingly, it's a very interesting fact to find out, right? Okay, considering the Vietnamese government, also with the media, how bánh mì is portrayed. Actually, Vietnamese media seek to legitimize their own narrative about the status of bánh mì as an undisputable national symbol. A good case study was when bánh mì was featured by Google Doodle on March 24, 2020. Within one day, major outlets such as Thanh Niên, Tuổi Trẻ, VnExpress, and even VTV, the state broadcaster under the direction of Vietnamese government.
Và hơn 10 quốc gia trên thế giới đã xuất hiện hình ảnh chiếc bánh mì cùng với cụm từ tôn vinh bánh mì Việt Nam.
Most of the reports placed a strong emphasis on the fact that the position of bánh mì has not been affirmed by just one, but many times by foreign outlets. In the end, through a combination of techniques that relied strictly on both foreign and domestic coverages, Vietnamese media has successfully commented the position of bánh mì as a national symbol in the public consciousness of Vietnamese people. So, bánh mì, throughout a very long process of đổi mới and diaspora and every stuff, it has struggled itself to thrive into one of the culinary symbols of Vietnam. And it's actually a very good thing, is it? But is it come with pros and cons for the future dish that would involve the media of the government? And is it a very imagined community that the Vietnamese government has created around the people inside and outside and try to connect everyone together? And is it a good thing or not? But at the meantime, I think bánh mì is a very good dish for me to join in. Everybody should try it, actually. And you know what? I have been doing this until 8 in the morning. And look at that, like people are very hectic outside and this is the morning already. So I think I deserve a good old bánh mì for my breakfast. Then I'd go to sleep. Well, thank you for listening and goodbye.